is the latest changes in contact center technology, where we will aim to help you keep up to date with all the latest trends that are going on around the contact center and specifically technology. I would like to reintroduce our speakers today. Firstly, Nicola Miller from BT. How are you, Nicola?
I am very well. How are you?
Excellent. Yeah, settling in nicely. So do you want to give the audience a bit of a background about your role in the contact center industry?
Sure. Well, I always say that I am so geeky about contact centers. My PhD was in contact centers, so it's been a very big part of my life for probably the past scarily 28 years. And I've sort of waltzed in and out of operations, research, and consulting. But my role now, I said earlier, if you were on the sort of preamble, that I used to be BT's futurologist, but because of the crystal ball jokes, I am now slightly more boringly known as the head of customer insight and futures. And my role as part of BT's innovation team is to effectively speed date ideas and technologies to make sure that we future-proof the contact center. But I'm kind of at the very beginning of the innovation process. BT spends an awful lot of money on innovation, so we're the third biggest investor in the UK. We don't talk about this terribly well, but we are. So the role of my team is to make sure that we for our very large global corporates, I'm part of BT Global Services, so I work with airlines and retailers and banks to figure out what their business problems are. I do research about customer behavior, and we sort of glue all that together to try and say, well, what does that mean for the contact center? And how do we actually create an innovative path to the future for contact centers? Because there's an awful lot of change going on at the moment, and I think it's an interesting period for contact centers.
Excellent. I'm sure you will discuss further those changes in your presentation later. And our second presenter today, this afternoon, then, is Chris Bausman from Nice in Contact. Hi, Chris.
Hello, good day. Chris Bausman with Nice in Contact, and so my relationship, as I mentioned earlier, too, with customer experience is both both sides of the coin, if you will. So very actively involved and, of course, focused on helping customers find the right technology, the right tools, the best practices with contact center technology today, and all that surrounds it. So we at Nice in Contact have a unified cloud platform that can help you with all of your routing, interaction handling. So actually helping you with real-time service, but also all the other bits that can really help you pull it together. So for workforce optimization, making sure scheduling, quality, the analytics, really to understand those conversations, adding in the automation, AI, the robotics to help both help the agents be more productive, as well as give some more self-service options. Of course, to build it all together in an open cloud platform to keep innovating, right? So as Nicola said, the future is always moving, and that so we don't have the crystal ball either. So even though my team spends a lot of time talking with customers, talking with other folks in the industry, I'm going to make sure that we have something that's future-proofed in terms of growing with what you need. So a lot of my time is spent working to help find out that future, tell our story. And as I mentioned earlier too, that in prior lives, I've also spent time on the other side of customer experience. So on the e-commerce digital marketing side, where Omni-Channel can also mean a cash register, tying into your contact center. So I would love to look at the holistic experience and think that's one of the best ways that we can help our customers and our clients is to help them think even bigger outside of the contact center box.
Great, covering all points of the customer journey then. So also wanted to make sure that everybody knows that you can watch the replay and get the slides of both presentations this afternoon by going to www.callcenterhelper.com recorded-webinars, and that will be available for you to log on to see, just in case you miss any great bits of content that you might want to refer back to later. That will be available from this afternoon. Also, we already have a lot of people in our chat room, which you can join in the conversation, where you can share all your best practices and ask questions to our experts in between their presentations. And you can do that by going to www.callcenterhelper.com/chat. What we would advise you do once you're in the chat room is to have the webinar on one side of your screen and the chat room on the other, so you can make sure that obviously you're switching your attention from our great presentations and you're discussing them, getting involved, putting your questions to our experts in between. You can do that, and that's probably the best way to go with that. Also, another bonus of being in our chat room is that you have the opportunity to download slides and download the chat log as shown on your screen right now. Just follow those instructions and you'll be able to do so after the webinar. And another benefit of being in our chat room is that we have champagne or chocolates that are awarded to you for best tips. We'll make sure they're sent out to you, and you can, for your chance to win either of those throughout the webinar, just put hashtag tip for a tip and hashtag question for a question, and make sure you put those in, and we'll discuss them in between the presentations. But the next thing that we'd like to do is that we're going to put a question to the chat room. That's, how would you describe the technology that you currently have in your contact center? For example, outdated, slow, too many that don't work together. I know I've already asked you this in the webinar introduction, Nicola, but what answers would you expect to see here?
Well, as I said, I think we can all list loads of technologies in contact centers, but I think, as I said before, I think cloud is becoming one of those interesting ones that people are starting to acquire, that we were kind of like 3-4 years ago going, no one's ever going to be running a cloud contact center. And I don't think any of our guys have been doing an awful lot of on-premise solutions. And looking back at the history of the contact center, the reason it's a center is you had a switch and you hung people off the switch, and now the switch is in the cloud. You can basically get people all over the place, so it gives you an awful lot more flexibility. So I would hope that maybe some cloud is featured, but yeah, who knows? We will find out in a minute.
I assume that you would go along with that as well, Chris, would you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious to see, do we have a two-sided distribution here? So some people who have modernized in the last few years and are feeling quite empowered, and others who might feel that that their contact center moves at the speed of a tortoise, and maybe have their agents with with a half dozen screens just to get something done. So I'll be curious to see where you fall on that spectrum.
Excellent. And we actually do have quite a few answers in our chat room now. We have Charlie, who says that his contact center technology is outdated by about 2 years. There's a ... after that one. Isabel says that she's using SF, which I'm guessing is Salesforce. It says it's extremely slow. Matt says that, again, that's outdated, on-premise with separate call recordings and nothing's integrated for Salesforce, for example. Andy says that there's far too many systems here, one for phones, one for email, 2 different live chat systems, and one for debt collection and another for spreadsheets. I think that ties in well with what you were saying there, Nicola, about how there's going to be increased focus on cloud and integration. And yes, Sandra says we're currently being updated and going all out digital. So yeah, great. There's even more answers than that, but I can't sit here all day and read out the chat room. So before I hand over to you, Nicola, I just wanted to go through a poll with everyone, and that is, which channels do you use for proactive communication? I'll launch that for everybody now, and your options are outbound live agent, outbound automated voice, email, SMS/messaging apps, or live chat. What kind of results do you expect to see here, Nicola?
I suspect, I mean, there's a lot of SMS, I think, being used for proactive things like appointment reminders and stuff like that. I think, and obviously that tends to be a deflection mechanism. So certainly in BT, if you've got an engineer going out, just reminding people they have one coming out, and if they're not in, could they please tell us? That's a pretty good proactive prompt at the moment. So yeah, I suspect a few people are going to be using SMS.
Excellent. Let's share the results with everyone then. And we can see that 59% are using outbound live agents, 16% outbound automated voice, 75% email, 41% SMS/messaging apps, which I suggest is quite a big change there from what we would have seen a few years ago, and 30% live chat. Is that what you expected to see then, Chris?
Although, I'm actually the live chat number is a little bit higher than I expected, so that's actually quite good. That I think many of you are really taking that proactive step, whether it be to continue to build relationships, or as Nicola said, deflecting inbound contacts. So I think it's surprisingly high in the chat part, which we're seeing a lot of good returns on.
Excellent. And I think that chat on proactivity links nicely into your presentation now, Nicola. So I'll pass the so-called baton on to you.
Okay, let's see if the technology works. Slightly worrying, my computer just said, would you like to restart? So I'm hoping that, it's always the way, isn't it? Okay.
The latest technology.
I know, absolutely. Can you see my screen?
Yes, that's perfect.
Perfect. All right. So, for those of you who've seen me speak before, this is the latest iteration, which we used to call in BT the autonomous customer. So we haven't called it autonomous customer this time. We've called it chat, tap, talk, for reasons you will discover as we go along. And this is very much about the digital customer experience. So this is a survey that we've been doing for a very long time in BT, and this is a beautiful survey for me in terms of trends, because that typically I track trends. And the lovely thing about this data is because we do it pretty much every other year, I can see some very tangible trends starting to emerge. Now we've got more ambitious, I guess, over the years. So we started out with just 2 countries in 2010, and when we published this one last year, so it was November last year, we actually we published this. It was 10 countries around the world, including a sort of sweep across Europe and the US, as well as the UK has obviously, since we are based in the UK, always been one of the countries we've looked at. So for those of you who like stats, it's 500 customers per country. We try and take a very broad demographic split as well, and I think it's 51-49 male to female, if I rightly recall as well. So and so it gives us a flavour, but these are all digital customers. The way that we do the survey is digital, therefore these are not people that don't use technologies. So what I'm going to do today is talk you through some of those trends, and also, because I'm part of our innovation team, link into the thinking that we've been doing around innovation in some of these areas, because I think innovation needs to be customer led rather than, hey, there's a cool piece of technology, what do we do with it? But the first trend actually is, well, it is to do with technology, but I think this is the overriding human nature one, and I'm a psychologist by background, so I will absolutely say that, as consumers, we just want stuff to be simple and easy. So this will not be a surprise to anyone, I guess, because we've been mentioning the E word, whether it's easy or efforts, in customer experience circles probably for about the past maybe 3-4 years. Certainly I've been talking about it for about 5-6 years, maybe even longer, to be perfectly honest. And there are a lot of good reasons why we need to make journeys easy. The first reason is, well, frankly, particularly in private sector companies, there's a lot of competition, and we can make a very distinct link between easy, effort and loyalty. It's not rocket science, frankly, and indeed BT's own data proves that, if customers are finding things difficult, they are 40% more likely to churn. So that's the first thing. Obviously, the other thing around easy, even if customers do not have a choice and you're in a public sector company, you get cost, because if customers aren't finding things easy, they're more likely to contact you, probably over more expensive channels, and ask lots of questions. Now, I have to say some of these stats make me slightly depressed. I have to say that the fact that we asked the question that I find dealing with customer service issues exhausting, I would have hoped that people were finding things less exhausting. It's going the wrong way. So we're finding that this is the global aggregate data, by the way, that globally people are finding things more difficult rather than easier. Obviously, this links into some of the original innovation work that I did that you may well have seen me talking about, is around, well, how do we measure this? Obviously, the customer effort score is increasingly popular. We in BT use something called the Net Easy score, which is something that we invented ourselves. I have to say it's a shameless steal of the Net Promoter Score. But this is how we measure it. So we ask customers, how easy was it to do business with BT today? You rank us difficult, easy, don't know. And from that, we can start to tease out, we don't want to put any technology or innovation in that makes life more difficult for customers. So actually having a measure that looks at that easy, and also why is it easy? Why is it difficult? We can start to implement better technologies. And I have to say the first project out of the back of this one is, there's my restart notice again, is that we looked at our IVR, and frankly, people weren't finding it easy. I think it got to about press 52 at one point. So, you know, actually redesigning that was the first thing we did with Easy to make it a far less, not 52 options for a start. So probably a 3x3 matrix of options, moving more into natural language, using the customer's language, not our language. All of those things were driven by things like the Easy score. So I would say that the overarching trend, certainly amongst customers, is make it easy for me and make sure, I mean, certainly that 73% are saying self-service is good because it puts me in control. That control piece is a real key one for customers as well. The second one is about the smartphone. Now, frankly, again, this is fairly obvious that the smartphone is becoming the customer's window onto the world. In fact, to the detriment of things like the PC and the tablet, even tablets, they were cool a couple of years ago. They're going down in customers' preference. So obviously that leads us into discussions around apps, but unless you're a bank, and lucky banks, you will get your app downloaded if you're a bank. We did a lot of interviews with customers saying, which apps do you download? And we don't download every app because we don't have enough space on our phone. So if it's a choice between an app or my personal photos, I'm going to delete the app. So apps, I think, are problematic. So in the innovation space, we kind of were asking, well, how do we have an app without an app? So we've been working with Silicon Valley startup called Wraps, which is a micro app application. So in other words, you get sent a link, a customer gets sent a link, they click on that link and it launches something that looks like an app, but you don't have to download it. So you can personalize that, you can do everything you can do in an app without clogging up the customer's phone memory. So that's one thing we're looking at. Obviously, the other thing is, and we're about to publish a paper on voice assistants because, of course, we have a benign AI in our back pocket now. I have to say I've yet to have a particularly profound conversation with Cyril Cortana, but as Google Assistant demonstrated last week, these things are coming on in leaps and bounds. And of course, the Google one last week was a little bit controversial. I don't know if you saw it, but it was the voice assistant that made a phone call to make a hairdressing appointment. It was pretty impressive, but I think some of the debates that came out of it afterwards was, should you pretend it's a human or should it really be a machine? But I think, you know, we are starting to get into a future where actually our voice assistants could be doing a lot of the very mundane transactional tasks. And of course, on the other side, on the contact center side, we've got a lot of bots coming along. More on that in a minute, but potentially my personal assistant could be negotiating with your bots. So there's an interesting scenario, but we know that the smartphone is becoming more and more important. And of course, we can do an awful lot of things with these devices if the customer allows us. Then I'm going to mention Omni-Channel. You're probably all rolling your eyes at this point because, you know, we've been talking about Omni-Channel for so many years. We're not getting any better at doing it. And I'm not going to talk about Omni-Channel in the traditional way. I'm much more fascinated by the psychology of the channels that we choose. And actually, we did a study, 2 years ago called the Omni-Channel Swap Shop, where we interviewed customers in depth as to why they used those channels. And this has really been reinforced by the data that we got this time, in that typically, you know, customers don't think they're omni-channel. They have no idea what that word means. They are goal-directed, and that goal typically has an emotion associated with it. So there's an intention state that's either positive, negative, or neutral. And that is how people choose their channels. And this applies across age groups, across cultures. So we tend to have three types of customer. The visionaries are positively motivated, and actually these are the most omni-channel. They have a positive goal. They might be getting married, very topical at the moment, or maybe having a picnic, or, you know, planning the perfect party. So because it matters to them, they are willing to invest time, energy, and effort into figuring out what the right thing is. So they will use a lot of channels. They will, however, also be slightly paranoid. So again, this matters to them. So they may reach out and say, is this the right thing for me? Am I doing the right thing? They're not problematic though, frankly, as long as you make sure your channels are in alignment, there's no sort of contradiction. They're perfectly happy customers. The trouble is that you can turn very fast from a positive customer to a negative customer. We call them customers in crisis. We may, of course, also start in this mode, and these are very different customers. I mean, when you're in crisis, anger, frustration, I mean, there's lots of chemicals that flood into our brains for a start, which makes us very illogical. The key thing for design, as we get all these hormones and chemicals into our brains, the key thing to remember is our short-term memory capacity halves. Now, normally when I'm calm, my short-term memory capacity is between 5 and 9 bits. So if I'm doing an IVR, press 1 for this, that's 2 bits. Press 2 for that, that's 4 bits. Press 3 for that, that's 6 bits. I'm pretty full at this point. That's when I'm calm. When I'm angry, it halves. So press 1 for this, press 2 for, I can't remember what 1 was for. So instantly, what we find with the customers in crisis, firstly, if you're going to put technology in front of them, it has to be incredibly simple. My personal favorite crisis one at the moment is within a bank app. If I've had my credit card stolen, there's a very big button that says cancel my card. That's perfect for a customer in crisis. But actually, typically, customers in crisis usually reach for the phone, to be perfectly honest. That's their primary channel, and they usually want to talk to a human being, not just a lovely human being, but somebody that can help them. So they are quite challenging customers. But of course, there's the midpoint as well. So we're not always positive and negative. There's the utilitarian. These are doing neutral tasks, paying bills, buying carrots. We do not need wow. We just need quick, and we need easy. So we start to get lots of clues falling out of the bottom of these categories. If we can start to figure out where our customers are, we can start to signpost them to the most appropriate channel. Now, one of those channels is the phone. The phone is not new or sexy, but it's a pretty important channel, particularly for your customers in crisis. So we do tend to pick up the phone when we are in crisis. And obviously, there's all sorts of things, research out there going, millennials don't ring anymore. Well, they do when they're in crisis, actually. They use very traditional channels when they're in crisis. It's probably not their first choice. I would say that they use digital channels first, but use the phone as an escalation point. And I think the data that we're seeing on the phone is showing that maybe there's underinvestment in that channel. Because it's getting the complexity. We're getting less phone calls, frankly, but across the board with a lot of the industries I'm working in, particularly financial services, we're seeing a big drop in volume, but a huge hike in average call handle time by about 30 to 40%. So it's a symptom of the fact that we're shifting a lot of the simple stuff into automation, but then we're getting the really complex and emotive stuff, particularly coming in through the phone channel. Video is a small but growing one. We've been talking about it for a while. It's always the next big thing. And I think there are two areas that are interesting in video. One is the YouTube generation that are effectively not reading anything anymore. I think they've lost the capability of doing so, but going onto YouTube and looking at a compelling video to tell them how to do stuff. Now, again, in the startup space, we started to look around and say, well, that's all a bit flat and unpersonal. We found a startup in Israel called Idumu, who do something called personalized video, which is like a mail merge for video. So you squirt customers' personal information into a video. It's a bit like those Facebook things that you get, you know, this is your month on Facebook. So again, we looked at Idumu, put it into our showcase. We had a banking customer come around and go, that looks like a really good idea, particularly for complex stuff like mortgages and loans. You can just send out, you know, details about your mortgage in a video template and send that to the customer, obviously securely, but often we ignore those. And what we found when we trialed it initially was customers clicked on the video, they watched the video not just once, twice. Actually, one guy watched his over 50 times. I've no idea what's going on there. I think he has a bit of a problem, but you know, if we can make that a slightly more personalized experience, people do seem to want to use video in that way. On the other side, obviously, we have smartphones, so we have cameras in those smartphones. So again, scouting, we found a UK-based startup called Sitecall, which basically, when you're maybe doing fault diagnostics, you can send a link to the customer, say to them, can we take over the camera in your smartphone? So in BT at the moment, we're trialing this so that we can, if you've had trouble plugging your broadband hub in, we can take control of the camera. We can even turn the light on the camera, obviously with the customer's permission, and the customer can then show us what they've done, show what they've plugged in, and we can overlay things on that. This is the agents themselves can annotate it. We've also got AI overlaying it, because these are standard wires, so that we can start to label the wires using AI and pattern recognition. So it's basically, for us, it means that we don't necessarily have to send an engineer out to just say you've plugged this in wrong. We can actually start to do remote diagnostics without sending anyone physically out, and that saves us money, but it also saves the customer money and time. So video, small but growing, certainly for things like expert advice. We're seeing big growth in mortgage advice and health advice using video. But chat is the channel that's growing, and not just growing, but growing massively. Now, it has been consistently growing over the years that we've been looking at it, but this year we had a 20% hike in people's preference. So chat is very much where it's at. We know why. Firstly, it's a lovely digital first channel. Customers like it. Actually, organizations like it because typically it's a relatively cheap channel to handle because of concurrency into your agent base. And actually agents like it as well. So we've got kind of a triple whammy going on there. So we're not surprised about the growth of chat, to be perfectly honest. But it's also good to note that email is still growing as well, and that is a controversial channel. That can be an expensive channel, but customers still like it. So again, older channels are not going away necessarily. We are getting channels like chat growing, but that's an exception rather than a rule. Of course, with chat, we end up talking about chatbots. This is consuming most of my life at the moment. So how do we implement something that has a chat with a customer? And I always say the slight irony of calling them chatbots, because actually the one thing they're not particularly good at is chat. So I think firstly, it's interesting from the stats. When we asked customers 2 years ago about chatbots, they really weren't that interested. This year, however, 73% of them are saying, well, they have a potential to improve the customer experience. So we're kind of in a honeymoon period, I think, at the moment, maybe paralleled by the honeymoon period that we had with IVR way back when. And I think the problem is the expectation's quite high, but the reality is not necessarily quite so high. And I think also there is that sanity check from customers saying, well, actually, we know that they're good for the simple things, but we do want the check and balance from the human agent. We want someone where, you know, if the bot fails, we want to be able to talk to somebody. And actually, I mean, the reality check, certainly, I'm working on about 8 bot project at the moment. One of my questions is it becoming a triage, an IVR for digital? So can we start to deflect the simple stuff that's coming in through chat? The dilemma, of course, is that there's some incredible things that are going on with natural language recognition and processing, but they can recognize what you're saying, but unless you have the data behind it, these things are incredibly dumb, and they tend to be good at very narrow, deep stuff rather than wide. So it is a garbage in, garbage out situation. So if you've got previous chat records that you can feed the bot, if you've got interactive FAQs, although this is a conversation, so are they written in the right way to have a conversation? Do you have stable databases that these things can feed from? All of those are questions that often the vendors do not ask. Then, of course, what are they for? I mean, what do they excel at? And certainly there was one project I got involved with which was about complaints. And I would say actually don't implement them for complaints. The first problem with complaints is they're usually quite long, therefore you've got to pass them into a language that the bot can understand, and that's language is incredibly redundant. I mean, it was never built for machines to understand. It's about human to human, really. So how do we cut that redundancy out and figure out what the customer wants? And then, of course, adding to that, particularly in the UK and Ireland and Australia and places like that, when we complain, we often deploy sarcasm, and sarcasm and machine learning and algorithms and AI really do not go together terribly well. I've got a few examples there. Thank you to a particular train company for my free sauna this morning. That is normally passed by even good machine learning tools as a positive comment. Because the bot's never been on a train and it's never had a sauna. And in order to recognize that as a sarcastic comment, I would have to teach it that it was a sarcastic comment. Even more subtle and British, it was so good to see your maintenance department hadn't spoilt things by making unnecessary repairs. I don't even know where to start there. Now, there are some academic projects that I'm watching at the moment on machine learning and sarcasm. Good luck to them. The other thing is around context, and this is where, again, innovation is starting to come in. Can we start to figure out what emotions that customers are feeling to tell the bot, you know, am I angry, am I frustrated? So voice pattern analysis has been around for a long time, so we can do that. But in the startup space, we're starting to see a lot of companies that use the camera in our smartphone to gauge micro expressions on our face to inform the bot how we're feeling. Now, I have to say, I'm not sure about you, but I'm not sure I like that. It's a bit creepy, and I'm not necessarily wanting to share my facial expression with every company. So I think we're learning a lot in the chatbot world. We're learning that it's maybe not so straightforward, and actually it's not about, I don't like the word artificial intelligence, it's augmented intelligence, because actually this is having a huge knock-on effect to our agent base and making life more complicated for them. So how do we use the machine learning tools to help them? Briefly, I'm just going to mention a couple of things that we are finding that I probably do have to mention. The fact that customers are becoming much more aware around security. The trouble, of course, with security is often it makes things less easy for the customer. So how do we make it easy and secure? And obviously in the innovation space, we've been talking about biometrics probably for about 20 years. But because, again, it's coming down onto the smartphone, so whether it's voice biometrics or the fact that I can show a bit of my body to my smartphone and it goes hello, whether it's a fingerprint or a face print, that's brilliant. I don't have to remember as many passwords as I used to. So secure and easy, I think, is one of the interesting mantras. And then social media. To be honest, social media is kind of stalling, and it was the sexy channel a couple of years ago. And I think, again, it's been killed by its expectation, because the expectation is you get back to me within 15 minutes. That isn't necessarily being fulfilled by every company. And also what you can do on social media, it's all in public. Doesn't mean you can ignore it, of course. It is still a key channel, but it's maybe not as growing as much as we had originally predicted. And then I just want to leave you on the proactive bit. This is a really interesting one, because this is about data again. So the chat bots are powered by data. This is also powered by data. So this is what I call a me economy. This is my data. It's a customer's data. So if I'm willing to share my data, what do I get back? Now, the first step is personalization, and we're perfectly comfortable with that. That's what Amazon and Netflix do on a daily basis. So they are personalizing the interface based on what I have told them. Then we can start to get proactive. So again, in the startup space, we're working with a company based here in Martlesham called Contact Engine. Now they're using AI to start to look at that personalized data and say, is there something that we need to tell the customer before the customer needs to tell us? And let's look at their channel choices as well. So what's their preferred channel for proactivity? So it can then send you little reminders on things that you actually want to know. You know, I'm going over balance in my bank. So stuff like that, again, I think we welcome. As long as there's an advantage for us, we will share things like social media data and our personal data. The problem then is when it becomes predictive. So again, machine learning comes in here. Do I start to figure out what the customer wants before the customer knows they want it? The problem with that is it sometimes crosses the creepy line. There are a few retailers that have done this already. A well-known supermarket in the UK has a lot of data, and one of their analysts was telling me they can tell if you're about to get divorced. Now, would I then tell Contact Engine to send an email out to somebody to say, I'm really sorry to see you're getting divorced? Probably not, because you might not know. Maybe vouchers for wine would be more appropriate. So that sort of thing, hello, I knew that was going to happen. That sort of thing is, it needs a human to figure out what is appropriate, because if it gets too creepy, we withdraw our economy, and we're certainly in Europe in an era of GDPR, we are perfectly able now as customers to say, no, I don't want to share my data with you. And that, obviously, this is all about data, so we need that data in order to do that. This is why it's a me economy. So how do we trade data? And obviously this is becoming increasingly important in an era of things like the Internet of Things. So I'm just going to leave you on that, because I think actually one of the roles of the contact center could be much more proactivity than reactivity in the future. And again, if we can use that data appropriately, rather than taking the demand, we manage the demand outwards rather than having to do it inwards. So those were the trends that we found on Chat Tap Talk. If you are interested in the research, we are perfectly happy to share it. So do drop me a line and I'll pop the paper in for you to read it at your leisure. Thank you for listening.
Excellent. Thank you, Nicola. There was lots of great information in there from me. I particularly liked, I wrote down a few of your points actually. I particularly liked your point that innovation needs to be customer-led. Thought that was great. I think focusing on making the journey easy is obviously a great way to go. Proactivity instead of reactivity in your future technology thoughts, I think is a great idea. And for me, as someone who's running out of storage on his phone, micro apps was a technology in there that really I thought would come in great. So now we move to our chat room. And we've had, it's been very busy today and there's been lots of great tips and questions. And the first one was sent in from Andy, who says, if you're using multiple systems daily, it's worth getting your team setting their desktops up in the same consistent manner every day. I've made my contact center a fire up chart, which goes up on the wall to remind them to set all these systems up so they're ready to wow the customers every day. Do you think that's a good idea, Nicola?
I think that's a brilliant idea. Fantastic, yeah.
Yeah, certainly different, that one. But yeah, absolutely sounds great. We've now had a tip from Charlie who says, in response to Andy's tip, that there are a few collaborative desktops on the market that channels all systems through one interface. So the agents can just log into one and they're all up and ready. Is this something that I imagine you know of, Chris?
Absolutely. We see this as one of the biggest excitements from the agent side of modernizing technology, is having that consolidation to one, where it's in context as well. So I think it's a fantastic retention tool as well, right? Because we talk about productivity so often, but keep in mind too, when agents come in and they can really have what they need, it's simple, it's right in front of them. It makes the world of difference in terms of their motivation and their desire to keep servicing your customers.
Excellent. We've now had a question in from Adriana, which I'll put to you, Nicola. We want to see how we can implement WhatsApp. It's a problem that we've actually had with our sales team to communicate with them via WhatsApp. Any ideas?
Well, actually, to be honest, I was talking about this yesterday. We have a big expo in London called UC Expo, and one of the things we were talking about there was the fact that we tend to use the collaboration tools that we use in our everyday lives at work now. And of course, WhatsApp is an interesting one because most IT departments do not like you using it because it's not official and it's not controlled and it's not secure. The trouble is we do use it because it's a useful tool. But I do think actually, certainly in our area, increasingly in the contact center space, we're bringing in an awful lot of discussion around unified comms because of the complexity coming into the contact center. We're now having to make sure that people can collaborate either with other agents or beyond into other bits of the company to try and solve quite complex customer problems. So I think it's not just about WhatsApp, it's about how do we collaborate better. But also I think the IT guys quite like to bring in the conversation, well, how do we collaborate better, but also securely?
Excellent. We've also had an opinion in, also again on this WhatsApp/Messenger integration idea, the messaging apps idea, which was we have integrated Messenger, works perfect. Of loads of these opinions, and actually, problem with WhatsApp that AI is not legally available. We used WhatsApp as a tool to engage clients who can speak to us. I mean, there's loads of these going on in the chat room. Chris, how would you best recommend implementing kind of a messaging app in the contact center? Do you have any ideas?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that's really a challenge, right, is how do you get to that consistent agent desktop we talked about, but also be in all these different sort of semi-official channels, right, that where your customers are, especially in B2C, where it's WhatsApp, it's Facebook somewhere else, you have all the different proliferation of those channels. So I think one of the important things is what we use is we have some third-party partners that really act as almost a translator to plug in some of these multiple consumer ones directly into our single agent interface for chat, so we can actually route them conversations. If you're actually encouraging people to reach you on WhatsApp or Facebook or whomever, they can actually come through, route them like a regular channel, and have them pop back in the same agent interface as you might have with I guess your own chat window on your own website. So I think that's one of the things that we really encourage, is trying to get them all in one place. And so as Nicola mentioned, that helps us in that official, unofficial, and also helps with agents, right? Because of all of a sudden, if you've got them with 15 different chat windows open, and you don't want them confusing this with their own personal chat, right? Which is another trick when you get into these sort of cross-purpose tools here. So I think it's doing what you kind of funnel those into the routing, into the logging, the auditing, and the single platform as much as possible.
Excellent. That all sounds great to me. One last tip then before we go on to your presentation, Chris, I just want to share with everyone is that if you're a brand, was sent in from Neris, if you're a brand and you're on Facebook, take a leaf out of Weatherspoon's Chief Executive's book and think, is it valuable for us to be on Facebook? He decided nope and came off it. Don't be a sheep. Really think about what is the best channel to fit your brand and your customers. And I think that's just some really thoughtful advice there.
I've said that for a long time, and at the peak of hype, and it's the same with chatbots now. At the peak of hype with social media, you get customers coming in going, well, we've got to be on social media, and you go, why? What do you want to do with it? And they go, well, everyone else is doing it. And it's the same with bots now. Right, I want a bot. Why? Well, everyone else is doing it. So I think again, that's the case of the technology is being hyped. What do you actually want to do with it? Because if it's not for you, if your customers aren't there, if they don't want to use it, why do it? I like the comment. Great.
Yeah, it goes back to your point earlier, really, about making sure that what you're doing is in the interests of your customer and not just doing something needlessly. So that's it from our chat room for now, but we'll go back there later. But before I introduce Chris's presentation, I just wanted to bring a poll up, which was, how does your organization view your contact center? And I'll just share that with everyone now, so you can vote on that. What are you expecting to see here, Chris?
I think we'll see a few on here. Hopefully, we don't see too many of the last two, but certainly we see a wide range of this. So I'm interested to see what the final split here is. Yeah,
I would imagine as well the first two was kind of the split between those, but it'll be interesting to see what everybody comes up with. So I'm just going to close the poll now and share it with everyone. And the results we have, as expected then, I guess, was 40% said as a valued source of customer insight, 31% said as a cost center, 12% says as a profit center, 17% as a necessary evil, wow, and 0%, which is a nuisance. But I guess that 0% as nuisance is a good sign, and more people see it as a valued source of insight, which is obviously a great thing. So I think that ties in nicely with your presentation now, Chris. So I'll just once again pass the metaphorical baton over to you, so you can present.
All right, do you all see my screen?
Yeah, that's perfect.
So we'll just spend a few minutes here going through what I'll call the Fab Four. So these are technologies that are disruptive, but they're disruptive because they're often not in use today, and they have big real-world impacts. So I think some of them will be more leading edge, some of them will be more very here and present. But the ultimate payback here really is, how do these attach to problems that your customers have today, their agents have today, and there are things that you can actually make a pretty quick impact on. So to set things off, and I won't go into nearly the depth that Nicola did in terms of research, and she had some fantastic insights to share. But one thing that we did as a survey last year of 1,000 sample size is looking at a number of different dimensions on how businesses view the customer experience they're delivering, and how the customers they're delivering that experience to feel they're doing. And not entirely surprising that there's a disconnect, but a bit surprising about the size of the gap. So this is a 17 points overconfidence gap, if you will, from businesses. So most businesses think, if you think this way, 2/3 of businesses think that they're doing a great job at delivering customer experience, and fewer than half of customers do. So it's, again, it's not terrible, but it's really opens up a lot of room for improvement, both in terms of how we're being honest and getting real-time feedback from customers. And so maybe the feedback management program and performance management is a better way to look at this. But we also want to kind of peel that onion back and see what are some specific areas that we found as disconnects, and what are some technologies we can apply to that problem to do something about it. So I kind of wanted to summarize here what we call 4 common customer experience traps. And so starting off here on the problem of impersonal service. So one of the things we found as we looked through the data is what we'll call the 2/3 rule. So even as we talk a lot about digital channels, we talk about bots, we talk about other things that both sometimes consumers say they want, and maybe this is going back to Nicola's research, is that the difference between the visionaries versus the utilitarians versus the people in crisis. But if you ask them about their most recent interaction, on average, we found that 2/3 of customers still prefer an active agent assist, so connecting with a live agent. That doesn't just mean a voice call, but they want to be chatting, getting direct interaction versus self-service. 2/3 of interactions where the agent was assisting lead to a successful first contact resolution. So they want to talk to an agent. When they do, it tends to be successful. But 2/3 of the time, when they start that conversation, attempting to fulfill their request through self-service, they end up elevating to a live agent. So we talk about deflection and the customer experience and what they want and what's actually working. Having agents actively involved interacting with customers is still extremely important. And what that means is we've got to be able to empower our agents to make that a personal experience, to anticipate the fact that this is not the first touch point in their journey, right? If 2/3 of the time a self-service interaction or some other deflection attempt gets you to an agent, you need to make sure that agent understands that history, understands that customer, what they can do about them, or they're going to have another frustration. So again, I love Nicola's comment about our brain losing that short-term memory, losing that patience. So just be really aware here that once we put the agent in front of the customer, they have a tremendous opportunity to resolve that quickly. But if they don't, you can really escalate into a series of frustration because it's not the first time they may reach out to you. Related to that is what I call deflecting and deflating. So, and the good thing is we're seeing this become less of an urgent focus area in terms of deflection rates and containment rates as being a means to an end when it comes to KPIs. But certainly everyone's still under pressure today to reduce the cost of service, to push to self-service, lower cost digital channels. And so what often can happen though is that as customers, and again, if we look at those behavioral profiles, if they're coming in and expecting an urgent resolution, if they have an emergency, if they have an issue, but they're presented with a wide range of channels, customers may think all channels are equal in terms of service level agreements, response times, priority from your organization. So that's one of the dangers in that channel of choice, giving customers all the preference, but you not treating all channels equally. So a great example of that is what happens when a customer sends you an urgent email and you have a 48-hour service level agreement in terms of answering an email. Sometimes we see, and customers will admit that emails are sometimes where urgent requests go to die, right? So how do you try to deflect digital channels, provide that channel of choice, but also not deflate that customer experience when that channel is misaligned with what they need. Another big disconnect we saw, and this one's of course not surprising, is missed opportunities on mobile and AI. And we kind of lump these two together because I think Nicola had mentioned this a little earlier, is the AI and natural language voice and chat are a really powerful interface for having a richer experience on mobile, which is where most of us are reaching first today for customer experience. So being able to have effective AI combined with mobile is something that customers have extremely positive emotional attachment to. That's something they really want to get service in. They want you to deliver it well, but in terms of how they feel brands are doing, it's a 22% gap, right? They have high expectations, they feel getting low results. Of course, one of the big parts of that is high failure rate of AI to actually fulfill something, and so you need to be able to actually handle that failure. So if it's a success, that's great, but how do you do not just a move to live agent, but do it in a way that is both, again, in context, but not creepy. And so that's a really important distinction there. And then lastly, a little bit of tongue-in-cheek here is that the customer is not always right, and how do you deal with that from a customer service perspective in a productive and professional way? And this kind of also goes back to the dilemma of giving customers that channel of choice and saying, here are 15 ways to get to us, right? So again, a Facebook option might be offered. That might not be a good route. Again, social media might be offered, but that might not be a route you want to have your medical conversation about your medical records for certain. So while some companies have said we put every channel out there equally, we let customers choose. The customer is always right. Customers know they're not always right. In fact, 87% expect customers to direct them to the best channel and the best method to get service. So channel preference also doesn't equal effectiveness. So we found is that there's a pretty big disconnect between a customer saying, I like this channel, versus what is the ultimate NPS or average net promoter score that comes from that channel. So there's some alignment. As Nicola mentioned, chat is both preferred and performs well. But if you look at something like email, it's the third most preferred channel for customer service. Yet email has an average net promoter score of negative 11. I think it's negative 15. Actually, look at my note here again. Negative 15. So one of the very lowest performing channels, but one of the highest preferred channels. On the flip side, Nicola also mentioned this as a good setup, video chat. So video chats, no one wants to get up with them. They always think, oh, this is awkward, I don't want to do it. But when they do it, it has one of the very highest NPS outcomes. So again, one of the big things there is guiding that channel. And if they get in the wrong channel, moving them to the right channel to get what they need done. So let's kind of walk through each of these a little bit and some solutions we actually have to address these today. So one of the big areas we talked about in some of the poll questions was the agent desktop. So one of the really important ways that is actually available today to provide a big improvement in both that personalized service and being able to have that first contact resolution with that service is by consolidating that agent desktop. So pulling in information about the customer profile and history from the CRM system, being able to handle multiple interactions in one place, again, so email, chat, voice, social, all in one interface for the agent, being able to have them connect, know the presence of other people in the contact center or in the company who can help them to escalate issues to. So again, we talk about tying with a partner like RingCentral to be able to do unified communication to someone who's not in the contact center, be able to get help while they're live on the phone with an agent and find them quickly. But also being able to look at the customer journey and use analytics to show and prompt them, this is what happened in the last couple of calls. Here's a summary, maybe beyond the disposition the agent entered, in terms of the sentiment of that, looking at drilling in, looking at word bubbles. And of course, also, again, we look at the holistic day in the life of that agent, being able to pop up reminders from a workforce optimization or performance management perspective to remind them of upcoming breaks, let them do shift bidding, while they've got time between contacts, or if they've got some downtime, be able to put up a coaching package all in one place, all without signing them out as unavailable, so that all of a sudden you get a surge of calls. You can maybe have them pause that learning package, go back to answering interactions, and not treat that as two different systems, two different experiences for the agent. So again, really kind of putting that together all in one place can really help provide that the agent something that's very empowering to them, and of course a great experience for your customers. Another one is how do we address that deflecting and deflating with digital channels? Again, Nicola did a fantastic job of both exploring the whole landscape, but also setting up these topics, because one of the things she talked about was was sort of the AI, and is AI sort of the IVR replacement for digital channels, what really raises the issue of as you deflect and encourage more digital interaction, how you're using skills-based routing. How do you route those digital interactions to someone the first time who has the best skill to handle that interaction? How do you prioritize besides knowing what their customer status or customer tier is? So by taking analytics and AI and natural language understanding and processing, we can look at digital channels, emails, chats, text, social, and be able to look and see what is the topic of that conversation, what's the sentiment, the urgency, the pain, the emotion they have, what language is it in, what's some of the behavioral profiles of that customer, and be able to feed that into your routing engine and get those digital channels off into the right agent, service them, and this also can be a way to escalate. Even if you've got a 48-hour SLA, you can actually say, this is something where someone needs service right now. Let's actually get that to an agent and put that top of the queue so we can actually deliver that experience and match their expectations and match their needs. And we have missing opportunities or capturing those missed opportunities for mobile and AI. One of the things that I think is really fascinating, and it is actually something that is not far off, it's here today, is starting to blend artificial intelligence, not just for customers at the self-service bot side, but also for agents. And so here's this is a screenshot that includes a number of different elements, but it's a really, I think, a very near-term vision of the future of that augmented reality or that augmented intelligence that we talked about earlier. So we talk about here, this is an interaction that could have started from your website with a chatbot, AI-powered chatbot helping to solve an order fulfillment shipping issue question, collecting data, trying to diagnose it, prompting it. Again, we see a lot in AI chatbots today is that they need to be vertical specific. They need to be optimized with algorithms and the data that's tuning them for particular industries and use cases. If you do that and you narrow the focus of what they're doing, they can be very effective, but they still have a high failure rate. So you need to be able to elevate them. In this case, we've elevated this conversation to an agent chat. And we've shown the agents the full history of that conversation with the bot, but we've also netted it out for them. And so this is all the information we've collected from them. And also, here are some things I can collect as a bot with one click. So the agent can be doing concurrent chats, now controlling that bot, collecting more information, or saying, let me initiate a co-browse session. So the agent, the human, can ask the bot to work with the customer, get permission to initiate a web co-browse session, so where we can share the same browser screen that the customer is looking at, or be able to push pages and control that as we're talking with the customer. Again, now we're elevating to another channel, we're adding multiple channels, and we're getting the bot to help the agent as much as the bot is helping the customer. And we're working collaboratively. And this is a case too where, again, it's transparent to the customer. It's not seamless because we don't want to pretend the bot was a human in the first place, or that all of a sudden the bot has gotten much smarter now that a human is pulling the strings. We want to make sure that we actually share the information that now we've got you with a live agent, now we're working through this together, and we're going to solve this issue for you and get you on your way. But again, it's that augmented combination of the two working together. And then lastly here, looking at how do we address the challenges of the customer not always being right when it comes to that channel of choice, that preference. So we talk about Omni-Channel, right? We have two things that we look at. So one is, of course, the agent handling multiple different interactions, but the other is the customer, so being able to move seamlessly between them. So as I mentioned, not just an AI session, but also again, moving from a chat to a voice call or in that co-browse. And that way we get the customer in the door with how they want to be serviced, but get them moving along their way with the best channel to actually resolve that issue. As we look at how these are paying off for customers today, again, I mentioned these are things that are all in market today and at different levels of sophistication or adoption. Textile is a fast fashion retailer. It's by adopting cloud and AI chatbots and natural language IVR, able to really scale the business up and down and improve productivity by 25% of their agents. Madison Hotel Group, they were able to move to a cloud platform quickly and add omnichannel agents, so kind of combining it into a single queue, so kind of getting out of the physical PBX. They got a 30% reduction in call abandonment because they're able to lower their service times with the same agents, but also they started adding in digital channels they were doing with those 5 or 6 screens as separate applications, and they cut in half the time it takes to answer emails with the same staffing, same SLAs. And then finally, Mobile Mini, who provides portable storage containers for businesses, they were able to move their NPS from an already extremely enviable 78 to almost 88 and lower their average handle time 80 seconds by really blending in all the things their agents were doing together in one interface and being able to tie together some of the workforce management, optimizing that together to really do some very targeted and efficient routing between their contact center and their field offices. So again, some really tremendous results that could be achieved today. And so one thing I'll leave you with as a final wrap up. I know we've got a very global audience here, but if you happen to be in the London area, June 5th and 6th, we've got a fantastic conference coming up of Interactions 2018 in London, where we'll have a day of deep dive into best practices around customer experience. Lots of ways for us to continue following up these conversations and learn more. And so with that, I will thank you all and hand it back off to Charlie.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Chris. A lot of great information in there as well. Yeah, it's great. I particularly liked your point about email and how if you've got a 48-hour SLA and it's an urgent email, I mean, it's getting to prioritize the right contracts. And as you were talking about deflecting, I thought is a great point and a lot of great examples of how to use technology in there. But I'm afraid that there's no time to go to the chat room now as we've hit the top of the hour. Make sure you're all in there anyway. You can answer each other's questions, and there was great tips that you can download as I showed you earlier. Once you've exited this webinar, you can it will take you to a survey, which we'll talk about in a minute. But in 1 or 2 words, if you could first put what did you like best about the webinar in the chat room, that'd be brilliant. Here's the survey that I was talking about. It's straight after the webinar. We'll take you straight to that section and you know, help us to improve our webinars, and we'll find out ways. And there's also the chance to fill in the product demonstration. So there'll be a section there. If you want a demonstration of Nice in Contacts software, just fill in the box in the survey, and I'm sure Chris can arrange that for you. Again, you can watch the replay and the slides because there's a lot to take in there. So if you want to refer back to it, please visit www.callcenterhelper.com/recorded/webinars, which will be available later this afternoon. We do have time though for the winning tip, which was sent in from Patricia, who says, we found that having workplace, Facebook for work, has been transformative for us. We use WorkChat for messaging and Workplace for sharing. There are a wide range of groups set up, from closed groups for projects to open groups for wellbeing tips. Almost immediately, our large company felt like a family, with employees talking about common issues across different countries. And we'll make sure we get a bottle of champagne and chocolates out to you, Patricia. But there is just time now to say thank you to our speakers today. Thanks, Nicola.
Thank you very much.
Perfect. And thank you as well, Chris.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Excellent. And I'll be sure to see you all in a couple of weeks' time for our next webinar in our usual Thursday slot. So thanks again, and we'll see you soon. Bye.